Good morning, colleagues, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I declare open the 3238th meeting of the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Today we will continue consideration of the combined 24th to 26th periodic reports of Finland. I would like to warmly welcome back the delegation of Finland appearing today before the committee, led by Ms. Kirsta Oinonen, Director, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I also look forward to continuing the constructive dialogue we started yesterday. As I reminded the colleagues yesterday, we have two segments today as well, and we will focus on the themes in segment 3 of situation of Sami, Roma and other groups, including people of African descent, and segment 4, situation of non-citizens, including migrants, asylum seekers and refugees. Again, a kind reminder to all on the need for the strict management of time. Without further delay, I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Balsarjak, the country rapporteur, for his questions for about 10 minutes. You have.
And good morning to everybody. I also welcome back a distinguished delegation from Finland. Today, as the chair noted, we will deal with segment 3 and later 4. I will have some remarks and questions concerning the situation of Sami and also people of African descent. And then also co-rapporteur will share her remarks and questions concerning Roma and issues of education. But now, without further ado, as regards my part and questions concerning Sami, that's also in fact split into two areas, the issues of self-determination and political participation, as well as the issue of land, natural resources. So, the committee took note of the adoption of the 2025 of the amended Semi-Parliament Act and welcomes state party efforts to strengthen the participation and self-government of the Sami people. We also noted and welcomed the final report of the Sami Truth and Reconciliation Commission, published in December 2025. We also noted the Commission proposals as regards structural discrimination, language rights, land rights, government, as well as cultural revitalization. And now, having all that in mind, I think that it does not need to be recalled that this committee has been interested in the situation of Sami for a long time. That's expressed in our previous concluding observations. Now, despite the positive developments, we still remain concerned about the implementation of the rights of Sami people to self-determination. Let me also recall the 2022 opinion of this committee concerning communication number 59/2016, submitted by Ms. Ann Nuorgam and others versus Finland, in which the committee found a violation of Article 5C and called upon Finland to provide an effective remedy and to genuinely negotiate a revision of Section 3 of the Sami Parliament Act in a manner respecting the Sami people's right to free, prior and informed consent concerning their membership and political participation. We know that there were some attempts to do it in 2023, but finally, and apparently more time was needed until it has been done. Please tell us about it. We also know there was some controversy concerning the concept of dissent. when the conclusions of this individual communication, in our opinion, were considered. Perhaps you could tell us something about these controversies. As you know, the committee is quite consistent in its interpretation of Article 1 and the meaning of descent as a factor. Well, so we also remain, let's say, interested, but also concerned about reforms that, despite the legislative reform, important questions concerning the Sami electoral role and the relationship between state authorities and the Sami parliament remain discussed or contested. In that respect, perhaps you could also inform us more about the issue of forest Sami as voters to the Sami parliament in Finland. So we would appreciate your feedback in this matter. We also would like to know how does the state party ensure that the Sami parliament has genuine and effective influence over decisions concerning the Sami people, rather than merely an opportunity to express its views? What is exactly the function and role of the Sami parliament? What safeguards are in place to ensure that the definition of membership of the Sami community and eligibility for the Sami electoral roll respects the collective right of the Sami people to determine matters concerning their own membership? Could you please also tell us what resources are allocated to the Sami parliament to enable it to exercise effectively its enhanced responsibilities under the amended Act? Now, as regards land natural resources, the committee takes note of the state party's use of the ACFE-CON guidelines and of mechanisms intended to reconcile land use, natural resource management, and the protection of Sami culture and traditional livelihoods. It also notes that the state party's recognition in its periodic report of the importance of Sami participation in land use planning and impact assessment. Nevertheless, the committee is concerned, however, that by reports that the principle of free, prior and informed consent is not consistently incorporated into Finnish legislation and practice concerning land use, mineral exploration, mining, energy projects and other activities affecting Sami traditional territories. The committee notes that in 2024, the Committee on the Rights of the Child and the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights found violations concerning mineral exploration activities affecting Sami territory in circumstances where FPIC and adequate cumulative impact assessments has not been obtained. The committee is also concerned that although the amended Sami Parliament Act strengthens consultation and negotiation requirements, it does not appear to establish a general requirement for obtaining the consent of affected Sami communities in relation to activities that may seriously affect their rights, traditional livelihoods or culture. In this respect, we would like to know in what circumstances is the consent of the Sami people required before a project affecting their lands, culture and economic activities may proceed. How are cumulative impact of multiple projects assessed, including the combined effects on reindeer, herding, fishing, hunting, cultural practices, biodiversity, and the transmission of Sami culture to future generations? So this would be my question on the Sami. There will be also further questions by Dr. Al-Misnad concerning education. I might also have an additional one, and I took interest in the Kemi Sami language, the one which seems to be defunct or dead, and there are some activities to revive it. Is there anything that you would like to share with us? Is the state as such engaged also in the respect of reviving the Kemi Sami language? Now, with respect to people of African descent, Muslims and other groups, the committee takes note of the state party's anti-racism action plan and of its initiatives to address discrimination against people of African and Asian descent, Muslims, Russian and Estonian speakers. It also notes the state party's participation in European initiatives aimed at combating racism and promoting equality. Nevertheless, the committee is concerned by evidence indicating high levels of racial discrimination experienced by people of African descent as well as Muslim communities in Finland. The committee notes that the recent FRA data indicate that 43% of people of African descent in Finland experience some form of racist harassment and 54% experience racial discrimination during the relevant reference period. The committee is also concerned by evidence indicating high levels of discrimination against Muslims. And the committee is further concerned about reports of racist harassment and discrimination by politicians and persons holding public office. In fact, yesterday we have, I think, already discussed that to some extent. Now, what targeted measures has the state party adopted to address Afrophobia and anti-Muslim racism beyond general anti-discrimination measures? What measures have been taken to address discrimination against people of African descent in employment, housing, healthcare, interactions with law enforcement authorities? What measures have been taken to address anti-Muslim discrimination, including discrimination in employment, housing, and access to services, as well as racist rhetoric portraying Muslims as a security threat? And finally, what measures are available to investigate complaints concerning discriminatory statements or conduct by elected officials and other public officials? This would conclude my preliminary questions for this segment. Mr. Chair, if I may ask you to give the floor to Ms. Al-Misnad. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Basarjak. Madam Al-Misnad, you have the floor. 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll try my best. Good morning, everyone. My first part is about Roma. The committee noted that the state party successful national plan for Roma for 2023-2030 measured or tried to or aimed at improving Roma participation, education, employment, housing, access to service. But despite this effort, Roma, who only number 10,000, the committee remain concerned that about persistent anti-Gypsyism and socioeconomic inequality experienced by Roma. Available evidence indicate continuing discrimination in employment, housing, violence, also hate speech targeting Roma. In a study by the European Commission 2023, indicated that 72% of Finns believe that discrimination against Roma in Finland is widespread. The question, what concrete results have been achieved under the most recent national policy plan, which has been approved in terms of reducing unemployment, access to education, housing, and health? What measures specifically has been taken to combat anti-Gypsyism as a distinct form of racism? What measure has been taken to address discrimination against Roma and access to housing, employment, including discriminatory treatment based on names, appearance, or traditional Roma clothes? How are Roma's community involved in designing, implementing, and evaluating policies concerning their life and themselves? The second part is about education in general. According to several reports, indigenous, Sami, and other minority communities have expressed concern about the underrepresentation of their children within the education system and lack of culture sensitivity in Finnish school. These concerns include insufficient recognition and teaching of the historical culture and linguistic heritage of this community. One study examined the Finnish national core curriculum, found the curriculum continued to emphasize Eurocentric historical narrative and does not explicitly recognize or adequately represent minority group in Finland. The high dropout rate among Roma children raised concern. A study of basic education conducted in 2000-2001 identified the main contributing factor are frequent school absence, challenging family circumstances, harassment, bullying, and lack of adequate support from teachers. Furthermore, of course, the Roman language remains endangered in Finland with limited efforts to revitalize it. The government of Finland made significant efforts to improve education opportunity for Sami in area by establishing school and providing learning for children with Sami language. I think Sami, I mean, although maybe it's not enough, but maybe it's one of the minority who are really getting a lot of services in terms of education and other benefits. At a primary school, for instance, Sami language education often requires the skilled mother tongue to be officially registered as Sami at the National Population Register, which may limit access to for some children. Many Sami children live outside the designated Sami homeland area. Approximately 59% of Sami children reside in other parts of the country where access to Sami language education is limited, because the schools are primarily established in areas traditionally inhabited by national minority or where they are present in substantial number. The question is the Ombudsman report, Discrimination in Basic and Vocational Education, directing youth and immigrant backwards towards certain field involving manual labor. Yeah, this is the issue. It's always when Roma education appear in reports, there's always emphasis on vocational education, as if, because I mean, although it's wrong, but vocational education, it's looked at discipline for people who are not really academically high, or so I don't know why this connection between vocational education and Roma or minority children. The update statistic enrollment, I think what is really would be very beneficial for us as a committee is data, statistic number. For instance, we cannot assess the education of children of minority unless we know, for example, what is the enrollment ratio for Roma or other minority in a pre-primary education, primary education, secondary education, higher education. And what measure has been taken to address low enrollment, dropout among children from this group. What effort the state party making to revitalize the Sami and Roman language and other endangered language? What services provided for minority with children with special need? Because some report indicate these are the most affected people. The second segment is situation of non-citizens, including migrant, asylum. Oh, after the break. Sorry. I finished. Oh my God, I was so rushing. It's okay.
You're done?
Yes.
Okay.
I should have slowed down.
Thank you very much. This is the first round of questions, dear members of the delegation. I will return the floor to you for responses, and you have 25 minutes, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, distinguished members of the committee. Good morning. We are very pleased to be back here. With regard to the Sami issues and the impact of your committee, I think it's such a good example. In Finland, we are quite often asked that what kind of impact the UN treaty bodies are having on our legislation and policies. And I think that your committee's views and recommendations have really had an impact in Finland. If we think about the recent development regarding Sami Parliament Act and other issues linked to indigenous Sami people. So we can really see, for instance, how the Supreme Administrative Court in Finland, the highest one, in its reasoning is really referring and using your concluding observations and views. And I think it is such a good example. A reference was made to the individual communication, Annenuarkam and others versus Finland. And here we have submitted 2 follow-up reports. The latest one was on the 17th October last year. And our understanding is that the dialogue with the committee is still pending, and we are in the position to provide further information to the committee if that is requested. But we have taken multiple measures in order to implement the committee's views and recommendations. Then I would like to show one example of the dialogue between the government authorities and Sami Parliament. Finland is currently carrying out an inventory of old growth and natural forests of state-owned land. And as you know, in the Sami homeland, the government, the state, owns 90% of the lands. And of course, this inventory includes the Sami homeland. And the purpose of this work is to establish a comprehensive and comparable knowledge base for decisions concerning the protection of these forests. The Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry established a cooperation group in 2024 to monitor and coordinate this inventory work. The ministry and the Ministry of the Environment and different areas of Metsähallitus, which is a governance body for Finnish forestry, it's a state-owned enterprise, are represented in this group. And since the beginning of this year, the Sami Parliament has also been represented in the group as the focus of the inventory work shifted to the Sami homeland. And this process has included dialogue and consultations with the Sami Parliament. And these consultations have been conducted under Section 9 of the Sami Parliament Act. And these have been really concerning these inventories and criteria used. And these consultations have been ongoing since autumn 24. And the most recent official consultation took place in February this year. And these parties have also sought to compare different approaches to identifying old growth and natural forests. In the February this year consultation, the criteria used by the government were compared with the criteria proposed by Sami Parliament's own Sapmi working group, and it was agreed that the areas identified by this Sapmi working group as forests close to their natural state would be compared with Metsähallitus inventory results. And this will provide comparable information on the respective approaches and criteria. And this work is still ongoing. The results of the 26 field inventories will be discussed in cooperation group in November this year. And further official consultations under the new Sami Parliament Act concerning the protection of old growth and natural forests in the Sami homeland are planned for February 2027. And some preparatory discussions will also take place before then. And following these consultations, the Board of Metsähallitus will submit a proposal to the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry concerning forest areas to be protected under the Nature Conservation Act. And now I'm happy to give the floor to our delegation, and the Ministry of Justice will be first, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I was on the Sami Parliament Act and all the questions related to the new provisions. I can mention that it's been a very extremely long and difficult project. There has been 3 committees working over the years, and now finally we are very happy that we reached the goal in the end. It entered into force last year, August, as you know, and in all of these 3 committees, when you asked about the FPEC principle and referred to the Annen Wargam case, in all these 3 committees, we have had the government parties represented and the similar amounts of representatives from the Sami Parliament in all of these committees. Also, we had held negotiations on the proposal as a whole with the Sami Parliament, and they accepted it. So their self-determination has been taken into account in this way as well. Also, this time, when Parliament discussed the proposal and the Constitutional Law Committee decided to make 2, especially one of the changes was quite minor, but 2 changes, then the board of the Sami Parliament accepted these changes. And the Sami Parliament, the Constitutional Law Committee was the one preparing the report for Parliament, and the Sami Parliament representatives were also always called and invited to take part. So they were closely following and participating in the process and had the opportunity to comment on all statements brought forward. One of the main goals of the project was to promote the realization of the self-determination of the Sami people. And I can mention that in the second last committee, when we were working on the proposal, the UN expert mechanism on indigenous people's rights made their first ever country engagement mission, and they focused on the two major, most difficult questions, that is the electoral roll criteria and the obligation to negotiate. And we continued the dialogue until the very end, and they were quite happy with the results as well. And they accepted also the changes made in parliament since the Sami parliament accepted them. And it was a very heated debate. Sami youth organizations complained that there is a lot of hate speech because the topic was very sensitive and difficult, and it was debated in social media and in the news. It was quite a tough process in this sense. There were many various kind of statements put forward. If I'm frank, also disinformation was being spread, and for that reason we very carefully sent to the parliament the decision by your committee, both in English and in Finnish, to try to show that what it actually says, because there was an attempt to maybe make various kind of interpretations of the decision. So it was quite a challenging process, but the result was nice to have after all these years. And we have actually, for MRIPS, because of MRIPS' request, we have an English translation of the Constitutional Law Committee's report, except for the dissenting opinions. It was very, very long, but that's what the majority of the committee, how they looked at the different issues. And also there were many claims of discrimination, that some groups are now being discriminated because of the electoral roll criteria were changed. But the committee discusses this theme as well. And the position of the Ministry of Justice and the government was that it's not discriminatory, and the criteria were prepared in close cooperation and according to the will of the Sami parliament. This discussion of forest Sami, it was a topic that was raised quite recently, taking into account that this project has been ongoing. So when the first work was done, there was no discussion or even mentioned this whole term. It was something that has risen in recent years, and it's used in various ways. For example, in Sweden there is a party that is called Forest Sami, and they are the Sami who are performing reindeer herding in the forest compared to those in the mountain, but we don't have the same distinction or the same kind of groups in Finland. So it's quite a debated term in itself, but I can send you the report from the committee where you can have all the details on this issue. So and at the moment the criteria, the election committee of the Sami parliament is going through all the electoral roll to start with a clean table that it will be equal for everyone to apply based on the new criteria when heading for the next elections next year. And regarding resources for the Sami parliament, I can send you a table on how the amount of resources has developed over the years. And because of these legislative changes, we have increased the resources of the Sami parliament, because there is, for example, the appeals review body that will be established that needs resources, and also for the Sami parliament to have more possibilities to hold negotiations in a timely manner. And so 600,000 was added this time. And we're happy that all the cuts that has been made all over the sectors, that we have tried to protect the needs of the Sami parliament at some level. When it comes to the FPIC principle and the obligation to cooperate and negotiate, we are now in line with the international obligations. The legislation, the previous act was pretty outdated, and we tried to inform authorities that you still have to take the FPIC principle into account, but now we have a much more detailed legislation as well. You have to try to reach consensus with the Sami parliament or obtain its consent prior to decision making. But however, the Sami parliament does not have veto rights, because the authorities, they might need to take into consideration other groups and other fundamental human rights as well. So you cannot give a right to veto, but we have also added now a provision on the process to make sure that all the parts of the FPIC principle will be taken into account, that you will actually have the negotiations in a timely manner when there is also a concrete possibility to discuss when everything is not already planned and decided, and to give the Sami Parliament information in advance and time to discuss the matter within their own their own organs, etc. And we are also we have organized training in close cooperation with the Sami Parliament for authorities, and they have been very popular, this training, and there is some material on the website, kind of checklist, what to think about before negotiations, during negotiations, and after. So we're trying to support the authorities who in some cases were a little bit lost early on when the provision was very short, and all authorities are not every day dealing with issues that are related to the Sami Parliament in any way. Now in the Act, we also have a new section 9A on the right, or the obligation for authorities to, on the one side, try to promote Sami rights and to avoid that the rights are being weakened due to projects, and this is something that is not new. We already have the rights of Sami to maintain their culture and language in the Constitution, and we have an obligation in the Constitution that authorities must safeguard fundamental and human rights. So this means also a proactive obligation to be proactive in this regard and take into account Sami rights on its own initiative also when authorities plan. And yes, you asked about cumulative assessment. This is, as I mentioned already, this is necessary at some level in order to be able to take into account the constitutional obligations to promote and the new obligation 9A, and also, of course, the political and civil convention, not to deny the rights, etc. But in the wording of the Act, it's not mentioned itself, the obligation or the obligation to assess effects. Did I reply all the questions? Oh yes, the Kemi Sami language. The government has not been active in trying to bring alive the language that has been unfortunately not used for so much time. We have 3 Sami languages spoken in Finland, and we have huge challenges already to try to support, especially the so-called Sami language, that they have very few users, and also Inari Sami and all of the languages we have a lot of challenges. We are trying to, at the moment we are assessing the Sami Language Act, and also we will have negotiations with the Sami Parliament. This is something that the Truth and Reconciliation Committee also has recommended, and what the Sami Parliament has asked for also. So we'll try to look at the Act and have some report ready before the next government take office. But maybe I stop here and leave some time for the colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Hanna Kettunen. I'm from the Ministry of Environment. And I will continue on the UN Convention on Biological Diversity and the ACWE-CON guidelines. So since 2013, Finland has applied the ACWE-CON guidelines through a cooperation model between Metsähallitus and the Sami Parliament, and these guidelines govern management and use plans for wilderness areas and nature reserves, as well as nature reserves plans in the Sami homeland, ensuring the resource use and protection safeguard the cultural, environmental and social conditions necessary for sustaining traditional Sami livelihoods. And in 2023, the Ministry of Environment has published a report, Guidelines Concerning Indigenous Peoples in the UN Convention of Biological Diversity and Perspectives on their National Implementation in Finland. This report can be sent to the committee afterwards. And this report contributes to the implementation of Article 8J in the Sami homeland and supports initiatives aimed at strengthening Sami indigenous rights and safeguarding traditional knowledge. And the Ministry of Environment has also published in 2026 ethical guidelines based on the UN Convention on Biological Diversity for negotiations and cooperation with the Sami reindeer herding in Sami reindeer herding districts. And these guidelines were developed in cooperation with the Sami reindeer herding cooperatives. And these guidelines aim to harmonize practices, strengthen the effectiveness of consultations, and support the meaningful participation and free, prior, and informed consent of the Sami in matters affecting them, and to foster trust-based cooperation between Sami communities, public authorities, and other bodies performing public administrative functions. Thank you.
I'm continuing regarding the mining sector and the Sami rights. So the Finnish legislation contains specific provisions requiring the assessment of impacts on Sami rights in permit procedures that concern mineral exploration, mining, and gold panning in the Sami homeland. So the authorities are required to engage with the Sami parliament and other Sami representatives when they assess the impact of proposed projects and permit applications. The Finnish Mining Act was renewed in 2023, and it strengthens the participation and environmental protection aspects. Changes have also been made to the government decree on mining operation, which entered into force this year following consultations with the Sami parliament. This renewed decree significantly strengthens the consideration of Sami rights in mining-related permit procedures. There are now more detailed provisions on the assessments required from applicants for mining permits concerning the impacts of the activities on the culture in the Sami area. Thank you.
Of Education and Sami, thank you for the committee for noticing the efforts that the state, in collaboration with the Sami Council, has been doing for quite a number of years. In addition to the latest report, there's been further concrete measures to strengthen Sami language teaching and also the teachers in early childhood education and care. So it's very important that it starts from the early childhood, and the language nests have been very important form in order to revitalize these three Sami languages that have been referred to. And then I just want to mention that we have strengthened the distance learning resources in order to take into account that the majority of Sami children and youth are nowadays living outside of the Sami homeland area, and very committed to securing the long-term funding and legal basis for this provision.
Good morning. I will be continuing on the targeted action against racism and discrimination of people of African descent and Muslims and other groups. Indeed, we are very much relying on implementation of the Non-Discrimination Act and have taken quite general approach covering different discrimination grounds. And this is the approach taken in many administrations, but we are combining also targeted action whenever needed, and in also cooperation with the communities. Yesterday, I mentioned already the roundtable that we organized with Muslim youth. We are also working with CSOs of people of African descent. They are very much involved in the action plan, in monitoring and implementing it. And the state is also giving substantial funding to Somali organizations and Muslim organizations for their advocacy work, but also for developing complementary services in order to lower or create equal access to services. What we are planning at the moment with the African diaspora in Finland is an event on the second decade of people of African descent. It's going to be happening in end of October this year, and we are quite excited about it. And also there we focus on genuine partnership with the communities. Also, the African CSOs are very active in other networks in Finland, like the Advisory Board for Ethnic Relations, also the national one, but also regional ones. And so the partnership and participation, supporting the participation is very important for government and in all ministries. I'm thinking if I forgot something. Yes, well, maybe I can mention about the Muslim communities. The Ministry of Justice is organizing a train of trainers for the Muslim communities in order to gain information on legal remedies in the communities, and we are planning to continue based on this pilot project even after the action plan is coming to an end. Thank you.
And so we will discuss next the Roma policy, and I will tell shortly about the program in general. So Finland's third national Roma policy runs from 2023 to 2030, and it is based on the EU Roma strategic framework for equality, inclusion and participation. And as a EU member state, Finland is committed to the objective of the strategic framework. And as a cross-cutting objective, especially participation, which was asked about, is considered in different target areas that are education, employment, housing, and health. And also the policy is strengthening linguistic, cultural, and social rights. So the participation of Roma, meaningful participation, was emphasized and sought, and to ensure that Roma representatives were actively involved throughout the process. And so the importance was attached to the participatory process itself and resulting policy decisions reflecting the principle that Roma people should be involved in the development, implementation, and monitoring of policies affecting them. Not only at the national level, but it is also promoted in intergovernmental processes. Finland is participating. And as an example, there is a project, Rakavaha Diediposta, Let Us Talk About Participation, which promotes cooperation between public authorities and Roma organizations. And shortly about in healthcare, there is also an EU co-funded active agency project coordinated by the Finnish Institute of Health and Welfare, where we are developing health services. When developing health services for Roma, particular attention is paid to culturally sensitive service models and also gaining trust between Roma communities and public services. Colleagues can continue.
In education, we definitely want everybody to gain the skills to be able to decide where to continue in the upper secondary level, whether it's high schools or vocational education. That's why the reform of support was done during this government period, targeting preventive measures, early measures to organize support for school learning and school attainment. And this is like the big work we've been doing the last years. Also in the development program that we are now running for the teachers and educational professionals about equity and non-discrimination, there's targeted measures for national minorities. And in this process, they've been organized also events with Romani pupils and students, taking into account their listening into their experiences and their views on measures now that they are doing these practical tools on how to enhance the work with anti-discrimination and equity in schools and educational institutions. But we have continued special efforts to follow up also development and improve, especially for Roma pupils. And there was done a survey last year, and it shows some indicated positive developments in school participation and attainment. And the similar survey was conducted for the early childhood education, but we know that there is work to be done. And then I just want to mention the extended compulsory education that entered in Act 2022, which enhances participation of all young people to the age of 18 in the secondary education, and work with student counseling. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, delegation, for your reply. You will have an extra time after the follow-up questions raised. So I will now immediately open the floor for follow-up questions by the country rapporteurs and members of the committee. Please mind the time and be concise with your questions. Thank you. You have the floor. Madam El-Misnad.
Thank you. Thank you for the answering most of the question regarding education. But the most important question is the data. How many Roman children are enrolled in primary? Not only Roma, all minorities in primary, secondary, high, out of those at that school age. And how?
To thank the delegation for answers and feedback. In fact, I just would like to share this remark. It's been, in fact, also echoed by the Chief of Delegation, Director Oinonen, that it doesn't happen every day that our recommendations or opinions indeed are directly reflected and are directly a cause of some legislation changes. That was the case indeed in the amendment to Sami Parliament Act, which is something, let's say, significant. We take note of it. Again, there are also limits to what the committee can say or how can it shape the reality on the ground. I would not perhaps like to now continue on the issue of Forest Sami, but thank you for the explanations. Well, the fact remains they remain excluded. They lost their language, in fact, or maybe not lost language, but they don't speak it for at least 2 centuries. So it seems they don't qualify as voters. But again, this is an extremely interesting example where CERD standards, in fact, were very deeply considered and taken on board. Just briefly, Chair, if you allow me, I have not mentioned, and you have not mentioned, the issue of the ILO Convention 169. The convention, Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention of 1989. We recall that at some point, 12 years ago, the Finnish government, in a way, promised to consider it, and there were some, I think, discussions about it. But perhaps you could brief us in the next round whether this issue has a future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Balsajak. Madame Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair, and my greetings once again to the delegation from Finland. My question follows on reports, part of the report by Mr. Balchazak, the country rapporteur on anti-Black racism. So the European Network Against Racism in its 2024 report, which was called Mapping Anti-Racism Plan in Finland, gave Finland 15 out of 20 after evaluating its National Action Plan Against Racism, the NAPAR. Might sound like not a bad score, but they also pointed out critical areas in need of strengthening, including the lack of disaggregated data, the lack of monitoring resources, and the lack of a civil society coalition advocating for the NAPAR. NR also highlighted the small team and small budget as obstacles in implementing the NAPAR. So given the rising complaints of Afrophobia, for example, by the Finland Anti-Rights Society, and the challenges in securing jobs by people of African descent with African names, among other anti-Black experiences, and despite the diminishing fiscal space, how can the state party prioritize the concerns about Afrophobia, which is increasing in the state party, so that Finland becomes a truly happy country for all? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Shepherd. Senor Vicente Vasquez.
Mr. Vicente Vasquez, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It's actually the first time that I'm taking the floor in this review of Finland. I wanted to extend a warm welcome to you. And at the same time, I'd like to thank you for all the answers that you have provided to the questions coming from our rapporteurs in this review. Having said that, you've provided us with information on
Can you repeat? Just give us a moment.
Okay, that's working. Okay, thank you.
question from the interpreters. Were you able to hear the English interpretation just now? Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Vicente Vasquez, you have the floor again. I very much acknowledge the information that you've provided us with, and you talked about the mining law, strengthening environmental protections. Perhaps I didn't grasp everything you said, but it seemed to me that you didn't say whether this mining law has been amended to guarantee the free, prior and informed consent of the Sami people. So in this change to your mining law, are you including the free, prior, informed consent of the Sami people? I also wanted to ask a question on land rights. What legislation mechanisms have you developed to protect and recognize the rights of the Sami people to be able to own, possess, and indeed to develop the traditional resources that they have acquired and possessed in any fashion? I say this because I think we heard that 90% of Finnish territory is state territory, if I understood. But when we have looked at our committee reports in the past, the traditional and historic and ancestral possession of indigenous peoples, in this case, the Sami people, should be recognized as per general recommendation of CERD 23. As regards fishing rights, how are you able to guarantee that the restrictions, the salmon restrictions, what is being done then in order to counter these restrictions? What are you doing in Finland to ensure that state authorities actually effectively coordinate with the Sami people and rights holders in cross-border issues that do affect the territories of the Sami people, but I'm thinking in particular of the traditional fishing rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur Diaby.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. My greetings to the delegation of the State Party that since yesterday has been sharing with the committee progress made and efforts undertaken by the government since the last dialogue, and this is, of course, to be commended. Chair, this morning I would like to raise a couple of questions. First on threats against the Sami and the second on people of African descent. We have heard reports of what's been called the railway line. This draft or this project for a railway line is threatening the Sami in three ways. First of all, it cuts through Sami lands. The railway will divide up pasture land and block the general migration route for reindeer. I'm wondering what's being done to try to address these threats. There's also the cultural threats. Reindeer raising and ancestral ways of living risk disappearing. What measures are being taken to try to support and conserve those ways of life of the Sami people if this bill or this project were indeed to happen? And the third threat is the destruction of nature, because this project fragments the major forest of the north. Are measures being taken to try to engage in free, prior, informed consent of the Sami people? The second block of questions I have relate to people of African descent. Now, as an independent nation, Finland did not take part in the transatlantic slave trade. But Finland was part of the Swedish Empire until 1809. Sweden was a producer of iron and oak that was used to try to chain many people across the world. And we've seen also these imperial structures from the past. I'm wondering what is happening for the second decade of people of African descent that will be launched in October. In school textbooks, for example, are Finnish children aware of this past that Finland had and how they're connected to tragedy that happened elsewhere? What about the people who have suffered from at the hands of the transatlantic slave trade, and how can they turn out to be happy people like you are in Finland today? Thank you.
3-4 minutes to spare. If anyone would like to take the floor. Members? Okay, thank you. Let me just one small comment about what you have said in your initial intervention this morning. We appreciate very much the information that the committee's recommendations are being effective. And we appreciate that. We commend the Finnish authorities for taking care of situations that are highlighted by the committee as issues that require attention, and taking necessary, at least trying to make necessary measures to address them. This is very important for us because your success is also our success. So in that sense, we commend and we encourage the state party to go along this line. And it will never be enough. We all know that. So there will always be room for improvement. And the committee and the future get-togethers like this will also be reminding you of the next steps to be taken. Thank you. And I'll immediately give you the floor, Madam, for replying to the questions raised by the country task force and other members of the committee. You have 20 minutes for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. After your wise words, I don't have anything to add, and I'm happy to give floor back to the delegation, and the Ministry of Justice will be first.
Thank you very much for your questions. If I add a little bit about the question of forest Sami, how we see it is that you have to take into account the public international law on indigenous people's rights, and especially the UN Declaration on indigenous people's rights and the right to self-determination when it comes to deciding on membership of the group. And taking this into account, and in Finland, the Sami parliament is the legal representative of the people, so we have to respect the views of the Sami parliament in this regard. When it comes to this group that became very active during the last stages of the Sami parliament, or discussions on the Sami Parliament Act, the big major parts of this group are not part in the electoral roll, or was not in the electoral roll even previously. So in that sense, the situation did not have big changes except for a few individuals. The ILO 169 convention, this government has not taken a stance on the topic because they prioritized making the amendments to the Act on the Sami Parliament. And of course, these amendments make it so much easier to proceed on this convention as well, since the obligation to negotiate is now in line with the ILO convention as well. During the previous government period, a memorandum was written on the prerequisites for ratification, but it would need to be updated. There was efforts in 2014, but we were not successful to ratify the convention at this stage, and some changes in legislation has happened since then. Now the Truth and Reconciliation Committee has recommended also the ratification, so we will see what the next government decides to do. And I can mention that we have translations on a few parts of the Sami Parliament Act, and we can send them to you as well if it's of interest. Thank you.
Okay, I will then continue on people of African descent and anti-Black racism. Thank you for your questions. Indeed, we have taken note of the evaluation by NR and also that of the European Commission of the National Action Plans. The NR evaluation was mainly focused on the previous action plan, and I am happy to tell that in the current action plan, we are much improved also in the participation of people of African descent in the design and implementation and monitoring of the action plan. We have, for instance, given or invited representatives of the monitoring network to the government working group meetings so that they can kind of follow up and also participate in the discussions relating to the implementation of the action plan. Also, NR was in their evaluation making comments about the budget and limited resources, but and in the previous action plan, indeed, we had very limited resources, mainly based on projects, EU projects that we had applied for. But in the current action plan, we have stayed budget of 6 million euros to implement the action plan, and which we are, of course, very happy and hope that we will also have in the future resources in order to increase the volume of the trainings and other activities. And finally, NR was making a comment that there is no coalition of civil society organizations advocating for NAPAR implementation. So this is exactly what we are very proud of, that we now have this network of CSOs and researchers to cooperate with. As regards the second decade, indeed, schools are very important. We are also planning for our event morning session for schools to raise awareness of racism and anti-racism. I must say awareness of the history of slavery and also Finland's kind of relation to that is raising in Finland at the moment. The academia has a very important role in this to play. We have significant and renowned researchers in Helsinki University and other universities as well, including researchers of African descent who have made very good reports to raise awareness about this issue. And I believe that it's a process, and slowly this awareness will also be increased in the official school material. At the moment, it is also down to teachers what kind of material they use in their education, in their lessons, and there's plenty of material already available at the moment. So I think it will improve in the future.
And just to add on that, in the core curriculum for basic education, it's very specifically noted the colonialism and the consequences of a colonialism, also as a part of our joint European history. And if I may respond to the Romani question, looking at the quote, Romani children go to basic education. That hasn't been an issue. They attend to the school. Then there's been this question of the attainment in the upper secondary education or vocational education. Of course, now this prolonged mandatory school pass up to age 18 is helping with that. There is no specific statistics, but there's been studies done by the National Research Institute, which we can send to you. But this is from the time before this mandatory going to school up to year 18 was in act. And now, of course, in order to ensure the school pass for everybody to the upper secondary or vet education, there is this preparatory. So we need to follow up. There is an obligation from the officials also to follow up every children under age 18.
And I could add in general that regarding the third national Roma policy, as it's based on the EU strategy, it's also that the Commission will monitor it at the EU level based on the surveys of the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights and feedback from the civil society, and there will be evaluation and also midterm evaluation carried out.
Hello, everybody. I'm Päivi Tolpukkila from the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and I will answer on the question concerning fishing rights. Finland and Norway share two salmon rivers, Tana River, which is one of the largest Atlantic salmon rivers in the world, and the Naden River. It's a medium-sized salmon river compared to other Norwegian salmon rivers. According to comprehensive monitoring data, salmon stocks have declined dramatically since 2019. Salmon fishing in Tana River has been closed and has proven effective, substantially increasing the number of spawning salmon and improving the possibilities for stock recovery. The adverse impacts of the fishing ban on local communities have been mitigated through granting of cultural exemption permits. These permits that allow for a limited use of traditional salmon fishing culture of the Tana River communities. In addition, very limited salmon fishing has been permitted in certain Tana tributaries. When scientific assessments have indicated that a particular tributary contains a harvestable surplus while maintaining conservation objectives. The salmon stock in Naden River has also declined rapidly over the past few years. Negotiations between Finland and Norway are currently underway to renew the bilateral fisheries agreement governing the river. The existing agreement dates from the 1970s and it no longer meets contemporary standards for sustainable salmon management. Furthermore, the Skolt Sami Sida administration and the Finnish Sami parliament, they play important roles in the Finnish delegation responsible for renewing the Naden Fisheries Agreement. The Naden River lies within the homeland of area of the Skolt Sami people. Their participation is thus considered essential. And the Skolt Sami Sida administration has a role as a vice chair of the delegation. Furthermore, Finland conducts an annual consultation process with the Sami parliament to assess the need for changes to fishing regulations in these rivers and to ensure that indigenous perspectives are incorporated into fisheries management. Finally, there has been several projects in order to better combine scientific knowledge and traditional indigenous knowledge in salmon management. For example, traditional fishing methods have been adopted and developed to target invasive pink salmon while minimizing bycatch of Atlantic salmon. Thank you.
So I will continue briefly on the rights on land. So we can help to safeguard Sami rights by ensuring meaningful Sami participation in land use planning and decision making. And this includes applying the principle of free, prior and informed consent and engaging in consultation with Sami representatives on projects that may affect the Sami homeland and implementing the consultation obligations set in the Sami Parliament Act. And this is linked to the ethical guidelines that I mentioned earlier, and this can be sent to the committee. And once I have the floor, I will also like to answer shortly on the question about Roma and housing. So as a part of the national Roma policy, we monitor the development of equality in housing among Roma. And the latest follow-up report is currently being prepared and it will be published by 2027. And the report examines access to housing, the selection of residents to state-subsidized rental housing, and housing counseling services from the perspective of the Roma. Thank you.
If I may continue regarding the question on the free, prior and informed consent in the mining legislation, I could answer that the overall direction of the reforms within this area have been towards stronger indigenous participation and more robust protection of cultural rights. So recent legislative reforms have significantly enhanced the framework for safeguarding Sami rights within the mining governance. Authorities are now required to pay greater attention to the cumulative impacts on Sami culture and traditional livelihoods, and consultation mechanisms have been strengthened. Together with the developments in the Sami self-government legislation, these reforms contribute to a more participatory and rights-sensitive decision-making process. And we are, of course, always continuing to develop the consultation methods. Thank you.
Then there was a question about so-called Arctic Ocean Railway, which we call Jäämeren rata. For this Arctic Ocean Railway, only a preliminary study was carried out at the time, but it is not an ongoing project. It does not exist at the moment. But we have the so-called Rail Nordica project, which aims to extend the standard European rail width to Finland, because this is quite interesting. The Finnish railway network currently uses a track width which is approximately 90 millimeters wider than the standard used in most of Europe, and therefore we cannot have this direct connection by train from Finland to Europe. But there was this first phase of this project, and this was between Finland and Sweden, between Haparanda and Tornio. And now there have been discussions whether we could extend this one also to Oulu and Rovaniemi, these bigger cities in Lapland. But this is really in the western part of Lapland. But this so-called Arctic Ocean Railway project, it does not exist at the moment. Does the delegation have any more additional information or replies you would like to share? No, at this moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, delegation. To turn this into more interactive, we have a few more minutes. If there are any follow-up questions to the follow-up. Madam Shepherd, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, delegation, for the answers. Although I didn't hear an answer to the questions I posed on Napar. So if I could get some answers on that, that would be great. I also heard your response to Monsieur Diaby on the issue of textbooks and the curriculum. And I think I heard you saying that the teachers decide on the textbooks and the curriculum. So is there not an overarching entity like a Ministry of Education or something like that that would oversee or give some guidance? I just wanted to know about that. And then several agencies like ECRI, the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, have issued statements about racial profiling, anti-Black racial profiling in Finland, despite the former legal prohibitions under the Aliens Act. So I wanted to bring your attention to General Recommendation 36, which is that was adopted by the committee in 2020, and the title is Preventing and Combating Racial Profiling by Law Enforcement Officials. So I would urge you to perhaps make use of this general recommendation and pay some attention to what I've been reading about racial profiling of ethnic minorities, including people of African descent, in the state party. Thank you.
Thank you. If you can very briefly answer these questions. Otherwise, you will have 48 hours after the end of this process to provide the committee with written answers when and where you wish. Thank you. You have the floor.
Eager to answer. We have a national core curriculum that is to be followed in all schools. There are local versions, but they cannot take anything out of the national curricula, but they can make some local amendments. And then so this national core curricula is to be followed by everybody. Then there are different, providers of learning books that follow this national core curriculum, and teachers are welcome to choose from the materials. But of course, everybody follow the core curriculum. Then I have of the sports that was questioned yesterday, but I give the chair the chance to decide when it's appropriate to tell some nice things about sports.
Please allow space for the written contribution as well. Would that satisfy Madam Shepherd, or no? But anyway, you have noted the questions. You will have time to reflect on them. With that, thank you very much. We will take a break and we will restart our meeting at 11:30 sharp. Let's assume it's 11:30 sharp, although it's not. We will now start segment 4. I will give the floor to the co-rapporteur, Madame El Misnad, to put her questions. You have the floor for 20 minutes.
Chair, I will take my time, not the first time. Anyway, the segment 4 is about the situation of non-citizens, including migrant, asylum seeker, and refugee. And actually, I mean, there has been so many changes that affected this segment of the society. For instance, some reports indicate that Finland migration and asylum policies have been shifted towards stricter restriction. These include as an emerging role until 2028. In December 2024, the government extended the Emergency Act, allowing the suspension of the risk to seek asylum at Eastern Europe within Russia and introducing stricter requirement for family reunification. And that was explained because of security issue, but I mean, I don't know. And also, I think the Emergency Act was extended to 2030, as I understood. The government has tightened regulation governing work permits for foreign nationals. Since September 2040, reduction in social assistance benefit have affected marginalized group, including low-income individual and person with disability. The emergency law limit asylum seeker and grant and also I think the reduction in the, or there is a new rule in the social benefit that the person have to be resident in Finland for more than 3 years, and his language or Finnish language is of a certain level, which also has been increased in recent years. For these people, they have what that was called integration benefit for those who are unemployment migrant who have residence in Finland for less than 3 years and who do not meet employment or language criteria, which has been already increased to a higher level. This, will not be entitled to, either they will not be entitled or they will be reduced in the social benefit they are giving, and also the child care benefit. Also, at the reception allowance has been also reduced. In 2025, Finnish Immigration Service survey of reception center officials found out the recipient faced severe difficulties covering essential daily expense, such as food, clothing, and hygiene items, with many accumulated debt and increasingly forced to rely on external food. So the situation is really getting very difficult with this new rule and regulation for refugee and asylum seeker. The government has also significantly reduced its refugee quota to 500 a year as of 2024. The government has introduced legislative amendment that roll back certain protection within migration and asylum policy, including the following: comprising the fairness of the asylum procedure by no longer systematically verifying the accuracy of the interview records. The emergency rule, which has been extended, limit asylum seeker and give authority to the border people to deny any interest to any asylum seeker, even if they have to use force, and also deny any possibility for appeals. Imposing more stringent requirement for obtaining citizenship and tightening the condition of granting permanent residency, like, as I said, increasing the level of mastering the Finnish language to a higher level. Also, in terms of employment, according to statistics from the Ministry of Justice, 38% of Arabic-speaking individual and 31% of Russian-speaking individual reported experiencing discrimination in employment. According to the state report, page 29, discrimination persists in the labor market, particularly job applicants whose name suggests they are non-European background. Well, the question, what has been the impact of certain legislative changes affecting non-citizens and the temporary measure adopted to manage international migration? Please provide update statistic on the population of asylum seeker, migrant, and refugee residents in the country. Also, please provide update statistic on asylum application and their outcome, the average duration of administrative detention, and the number of asylum seekers, particularly children, held in police detention facility. What measure has been taken to ensure the well-being of asylum seeker, refugee, and migrant, including access to adequate healthcare service, employment opportunities, family reunification, and social assistance? What measures has the state party taken to prevent and combat violence in reception center? Also, I think there is one point which I read somewhere concerning the new legislation for this group, is that also for health service, it's only allowed for emergency. But if the issue is not emergent or is not critical, then health assistance might be denied. These are my questions, and I hope I will have good answer for it. Thank you.
I might have just a supplementary comment and one question. The co-rapporteur has provided some context and detailed questions, but also let me make it clear that also the committee is, of course, concerned about the situation on several levels, but also the committee is aware that security situation and security issues give rise to some concerns when it comes also to situation in Eastern Europe in general. What I'm trying to say is that it's so that we have been also discussing it with other delegations and in other contexts that unfortunately migrants are also victims of instrumentalization, not necessarily by the state which we discuss it with. In other words, we are aware of the problem of instrumentalization or weaponization of migration. We would seek your views about it, but also can you brief us about the general situation at the border, so to say? Because, again, it is not uniquely the situation of Finnish eastern border. Other states have some situation of a similar kind. It's deeply concerning and deeply, I would say, saddening that migrants are used, in fact, and instrumentalized, again, not by your delegation, not by the state concerned. If you would be in a position also to present us the problem as you see it, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Madam Al-Musnad?
Which is, I forgot to mention, it's the right to health. The new legislation, as I said, but I think I will expand on that. The new legislation restricts the access to for undocumented migrants to mainly urgent health care, came in force in January 2026. Certain exceptions allowing necessary non-urgent care are in place for children, pregnant women, person with disability. The person with chronic disease under previous legislation which was enforced 2325, irregular or undocumented migrant had access to non-urgent care that is deemed necessary for healthcare personnel. So I think also this group are affected by the restriction to the service given to them in the healthcare system. Thank you.
Thank you. I will open the floor to the responses from the delegation. You have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, distinguished members of the committee. First, I will address the situation at the eastern border between Finland and the Russian Federation. The border crossing points on the land border, here I emphasize land border between Finland and Russia, have been closed since 15th December 2023 by virtue of series of government decisions. And here is now something what I want to firmly emphasize. Applications for international protection may be submitted at other border crossing points at Finland's external borders that are still open and have been open all the time for air and maritime traffic. The government has renewed its decision on the closure of border crossing points on the eastern border. On the 4th of June this year, the government decided that the border crossing points on the eastern border would remain closed and that the submission of applications for international protection would continue to be centralized. And this decision will remain in force until further notice. It is not possible to enter Finland via a border crossing point that is closed. For example, there may be some physical barriers at the border crossing point. However, the needs and rights of particularly vulnerable persons will be taken into account. And our border guard is very well trained in this regard. And after these decisions to close our border crossing points, there was some extra training for our border guard. And business as usual, the Finnish Immigration Service examines asylum applications and the circumstances of each asylum seeker are examined in accordance with the law. After this, the asylum seeker may be granted international protection or denied stay in the country. And I must say that the above government decisions have achieved the intended effect, and instrumentalized migration has ceased for now at Finland's eastern border. Then about the Act on Temporary Measures for Compact Instrumentalized Migration, the so-called Border Security Act. On 16th July 2024, the President of the Republic approved the bill for the Act on Temporary Measures to Combat Instrumentalized Migration, the so-called Border Security Act. And this act entered into force on the 22nd July 2024, and it was originally in force for 1 year. But last year, the validity of the act was extended until the end of this year. Now, the Finnish Ministry of the Interior has set up a legislative project to extend the validity of this act. The aim is to submit this government proposal to Parliament in September this year. And the aim of the act is to improve border security and ensure that Finland has effective means at its disposal to combat instrumentalized migration, which is being used to put pressure on Finland and also on other European countries. The aim is also to prepare for more serious instances of instrumentalized migration. The act was drawn up in an exceptional and, in many aspects, a new security situation in order to protect national security. In Finland, our security authorities estimate that the threat of instrumentalized migration at Finland's eastern border remains high. The situation has not changed significantly since 2025, when the act was previously extended. Neither is quick improvement expected in the security situation. The application of this exceptional act would require a separate decision, and it would be the last resort to control the situation. And here again, I want to emphasize that this act has not been applied in any situation. It is there, and in order to be able to apply it, we would need a separate assessment. It should be very severe situation, and then a decision, and then we can apply it. But so far, it has not been applied. And the Act lays down the conditions under which Finland could decide to restrict the reception of applications for international protection in a limited area. It's really limited area on eastern border, on Finland's national border and its immediate vicinity. And if a decision was taken to apply this exceptional act, a person crossing the land border would not be able to apply for asylum. Of course, there are these certain exceptions. If a person is in a vulnerable position, then there is separate criteria for that one. And now I give to the delegation, and it will be the Ministry of the Interior first, please.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Miira Mikonsaari, and I'm from the Ministry of the Interior. And I will do my best to answer your questions about the migration. I think I will start with the statistics. And as mentioned yesterday, the numbers of asylum applications have been on a downward trend since the previous reporting cycle. And a total of 20,000 applications for international protection have been lodged in Finland since the beginning of the year 2021. I think that it should be noted that in the year 2022, the amount of asylum applications was affected by the Russia war of aggression in Ukraine. However, those who fled Ukraine mainly applied for temporary protection, for which since then over 95,000 decisions have been made by the Finnish Immigration Service. After the year 2021, to which the last reporting period ended, nearly 24,000 asylum decisions have been made by the Finnish Immigration Service, and in about 43 of them, of the decisions, residence permit has been granted. And around 26% of the decisions have been negative. Rest of the decisions have been inadmissible or the matter has been expired. Since the last reporting cycle, the 5 most common nationalities to apply for international protection have been Iraq, Somalia, Russia, Ukraine, and Afghanistan. Most of these statistics, such as the number of the applications and the decisions, can be found in the Finnish Immigration Service website. Also, it can be used in English. I think I can then turn to the legislative amendments during this government term. The government program of Prime Minister Petteri Orpo aims to improve the management of migration and enhance the efficiency of returns, prevent abuse of the asylum system, and establish clearer requirements for residing in the country. At the same time, it reaffirms Finland's commitment to protecting persons in vulnerable positions, including children, women, and persons belonging to minorities. While the government program is aimed at controlling immigration, the measures taken implemented with the concept of strict legal framework. Non-discrimination is ensured by way of objective and clear legislation by the individual assessment carried out by the competent authorities and by special guarantees for vulnerable people. All migration legislative reforms are implemented in full compliance with Finland's international human rights obligations, European law, and the rule of law. And as mentioned before, individuals fleeing war, persecution, and serious human rights violations continue to have the right to seek asylum in Finland. Then I think I could add something about the objectives of the amendments made during this government program. And all of these objectives of the legislative amendments have been comprehensive and clear. And as the rapporteur mentions, there has been several amendments, and I think I would be happy to go through them, not in detail, but to mention the the objectives of them. For example, by tightening the requirements for permanent residence permit and the Finnish citizenships, the aim has been to improve the integration of immigrants by encouraging them to work and learn the Finnish language. The provisions on humanitarian immigration, including asylum procedure and family reunification, those who granted international protection, have been amended to common Nordic level with the limits of EU regulations in order to prevent an undesirable pull effect also. The ban on so-called lane changing has clarified the system of work and education-based immigration and highlighted the asylum procedure as a separate process. Also, there was a mentioning about the reception allowance, and indeed, in the year 2024, Finland did change the allowance amount and spending allowance provided by the asylum applicants. However, the supplementary reception allowance may be granted for expenses arising the specific needs and circumstances of the persons or his or her family that are deemed necessary for securing and dignified living and promoting independent coping. Ultimately, the supplementary reception allowance ensures that the substance or care of a person is not endangered in an individual situation. Finland has also implemented the EU's directive on reception conditions, and the directive provides minimum standards of assistance for asylum applicants, ensuring adequate standards of living for those arriving to EU and also to Finland and seeking international protections. And so far, no amendments to the provisions concerning resettlement, so-called refugee quotas, have not been enacted in recent years. There was also a question about the impact assessment, and I just want to say that we went briefly about it yesterday. My colleague from the Ministry of Justice was telling you about that, but I would just like to add that after the legislative amendments into force, informations will be obtained about the combined effects, and the changes can be assessed in more detail over time as the application practice also develops, and when necessary, changes are proposed. And then there was a question about healthcare, education, and also the other services. I think I'm gonna add something from the perspective of the reception services, and then I'm gonna hand out the answer for my colleagues here next to me. So asylum seekers in Finland are housed in reception centers. Reception centers can be facility-based or residential solutions, and the recipient of the reception services also has the opportunity to arrange their accommodation independently in private accommodation. The system is designed to provide comprehensive support and services. The reception services include accommodation, a reception allowance, social services, healthcare services, interpretation and translation services, and a personal guidance. Everyone in the reception center has the right to a safe living environment, and the centers must take appropriate measures to prevent assault and violence. Asylum seekers are entitled to emergency care and other health services deemed necessary by the healthcare professionals, and children are provided with healthcare services on the same grounds as Finnish residents. All the special needs of vulnerable people are assessed when taking into account and when providing these services. And about education, children aged 6 to 18 have the same access to education as Finnish nationals. And if I forgot something, I'm gonna back. Yeah, thank you.
I come from the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, and thank you for the question on the healthcare for undocumented migrants, and I will elaborate on that. So the right to healthcare services depends on particularly the grounds of residence in Finland, whether the person has a residence permit or whether the person has a municipality of residence in Finland. Anyway, the urgent medical care and the last resort necessary social welfare, which is like shelter and food and necessary health costs, they must be provided to all people residing in the country. But particularly on the undocumented migrants and the healthcare, until the end of 2022, the public healthcare providers were only obligated to provide emergency care for undocumented migrants and other individuals without the residence of the right to healthcare in Finland based on employment or under EU law or bilateral agreements. But from the beginning of 2023, the new section 56A was enacted in the Finnish Act on Organizing Healthcare and Social Welfare Services, granting undocumented migrants as well as other similar groups the right to necessarily non-emergency care in addition to emergency care. Under the new section 56A, children under the age of 18 would have the right to the same services as Finnish residents. Section 56A required that the need for necessary non-emergency care was assessed in relation to the length of the patient's stay in the country, and the right to non-emergency care under the section was excluded if the person in question had traveled to Finland with the express intent to seek healthcare services in Finland. The current government has enacted a further amendment to the Organizing Act, providing for more specific regulation relating to the right to healthcare beyond emergency services for undocumented migrants. For groups who are not illegally in the country but who do not have the right for the full range of healthcare services, the right to necessarily non-emergency care remains under the section 56A. However, from the beginning of this year, 2026, a new section 56B has been enacted to define which non-emergency healthcare services public healthcare providers have an obligation to provide for undocumented migrants. Under the new section, undocumented migrants have the right to necessary non-emergency care based on an individual needs assessment, provided that the denial of such services would be clearly unreasonable due to their individual's medical condition or injury, or if it would seriously endanger the health of another person or the general population of the welfare or the welfare of an underage child for the care of which the individual in question is responsible. However, the section sets an obligation to provide healthcare services relating to pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum care for undocumented migrants, as well as non-emergency healthcare services which are necessary due to disability for disabled documented migrants. As before, undocumented migrant children under the age of 18 have a right to the same services as Finnish residents. As which group under Section 56A, the right to non-emergency care under Section 56B is excluded if the person is in question has traveled to Finland with the express intent to seek healthcare services in Finland. With the recent amendments, the Finnish government aims to ensure that the healthcare services available to undocumented migrants in Finland do not develop into a pull factor for migration and for neglecting to seek legal status while in Finland. The amendments underwent careful constitutional scrutiny in the Constitutional Committee of the Finnish Parliament. And the committee found that while the amendment posed a limitation to the right to healthcare under Section 19, subsection 3 of the Finnish Constitution, such limitations are allowed under the Constitution when based on a distinction based on the legal status of an individual's stay in Finland and when they do not have the established personal connection to Finland. Furthermore, the committee found that the right to equality under Section 6 of the Constitution allows the distinction based on a person's connection to Finland, based on residence or employment. Do we still have time for the question about the social benefits?
I can give you a few minutes.
Okay.
So I just like quickly wrap up this one. There was a question about the chronic diseases, which I would like to shortly address. Under the newly enacted Section 56B on the Finnish Healthcare Act, undocumented migrants' disability or chronic diseases do not extend an individual's access to healthcare to cover all non-emergency care. However, the section requires physicians and other healthcare personnel to conduct an individual assessment of the person's medical condition and need for treatment. Therefore, non-emergency care relating to chronic diseases will be provided to undocumented migrants on an individual basis when the criteria in the Section 56A are met. So I give it to my colleague on the new forms of social benefits.
Thank you. So I will try to explain shortly about these two models. So child home care allowance, the new proposal, in accordance with it, it would require that the recipient has resided in Finland for at least 3 years, and it would be payable only to the parent or other guardian who is primarily responsible for caring the child. And the objective of this proposal is to promote the more rapid integration of recently arrived parents of young children, and also support children's integration into society, also through the acquisition of a national language, so that young children who have lived in Finland for less than 3 years, their parents would choose early childhood education and care more frequently than at present, and that they would be directed more effectively towards integration services and the labor market. And actually, it is expected that it would strengthen the economic position of immigrant household, as the parents would generally receive general social security benefit, which is at a higher level than the child home care allowance.
Thank you very much, delegation, for your replies. I will now open the floor for follow-up questions by the rapporteurs and other members of the committee. Madam El-Misnad.
One point raised by some NGO is about the child protection service. I mean, the question was, is it still on or not? I mean, I think in 1997, there was a report that children from minority like Roma, parents from Middle Eastern background, Russian, can be taken away from their parents and put in a separate place or in a separate institution, because I think the authority thinks that the parents are not qualified to take care of their children. The question is this practice still on? And if it's still on, how many children are coming under the social protection service in Finland? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and let me also sincerely thank the delegation for this very open, frank, interesting dialogue. The committee has received consistent input indicating that minority women, migrant refugee, but also let me include in them, Sami and Roma to have the general situation, face compounded barriers in accessing protection and justice for gender-based violence, including intimate partner violence, honor-related violence, forced marriage, and FGM. These barriers include language, distrust of authorities, service shortages. There is no surprise here. We know the barriers. Insufficient police recognition, a high evidentiary threshold. So I would appreciate the delegation's response to the following questions. Please indicate what concrete group-specific measures, as opposed to general, gender-based violence policies, are being developed or implemented to address the needs of migrant women, but please include, since we haven't discussed this,
if possible, Sami and Roma, how these measures were designed in consultation with the women concerned. Also, reports point to the absence of disaggregated data on violence affected minority women. Does the state party intend to introduce this collection disaggregated by ethnicity and migration status in this area? Grevio identifies also high evidentiary threshold and fragmented multi-agency cooperation, specifically in relation to honor-related violence. So what steps are being taken to improve this police recognition of this form of violence and to ensure also, specialist services are available nationwide rather than concentrated in certain regions? Since I still have some time, I would like also to touch upon the employment. I think it relates very well with what we just discussed on childcare. So the Equality Ombudsman notes that women from ethnic and racial minorities face overlapping barriers in employment linked to sex, pregnancy, family responsibilities, ethnicity, religion, cultural stereotyping. And of course, they are disproportionately, as we know, in low-paid, female-dominated sectors, such as care, cleaning, and domestic work. So what measures are you taking to address this occupational, segregation of minorities, minority women in low-paid sectors? And could you also report and could you also respond as to, reports? I think it was discussed, but I'm not sure. Excuse me. I apologize if that is on the traditional dress of Roma, this barrier. So I understand the purpose of this childcare, this measure on childcare, but sometimes again it's interesting to know if you took into account how friendly are the kindergartens for this, culturally also, from the cultural sensitivity approach, because what we see a lot is that women, of course, and families, they hesitate to send their children because also they are afraid of, the environment that they, and themselves as well, face there. So I think it's very good to have these measures, but also take other measures into account. Thank you very much. And if you can address the gender-based violence, have you, I'm sure I haven't read anything about that. Is it considered a public health risk? Since it's, okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur Diaby.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, my concern relates to the National Plan for Healthcare Development. Does this take into account or create a legal case for the development of traditional medicine from the Sami people? And is there some kind of collaboration between this kind of medicine and conventional medicine? And does it benefit from subsidy? Do the Sami people have the opportunity to seek medical care or use the traditional means of care as well as being connected to the modern system? Looking at the healthcare system for the Roma and other migrants, I wonder, is there interpretation available so that the Roma or migrants who cannot communicate in Finnish can also have access to healthcare services? Thank you.
Merci. The floor is still open for members who would like to ask follow-up questions. I do not see any, so I turn to the delegation for replies. You have the floor, madam, for as much as you want.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. That was very promising. So now, colleagues, let's shoot. This language barrier issue is really interesting in Finland. I just recently saw a map of Europe, and there were estimates that how many weeks it takes to learn each of the European languages, and there were quite moderate weeks, and then there was Finland, and there was forget it. So language barrier issues are really a question in Finland. but we have quite good solutions and also legislation for that one. And now I'm happy to give back to the delegation to provide replies, please. Ministry of the Interior will be first one, followed by Ministry of Social Affairs and Health.
Thank you and good morning. I'll reply on 3 points. One is the reception centers and detention facilities. So the main rule is that people are hosted in reception centers, and it is only exceptionally that they may be hosted in police detention facilities. The 2 cases, either the reception centers are full or the reception center, the nearest reception center is very far. In the latter case, the person can be hosted at the police detention facility only for 4 days. If a police detention facility is not available, the person may be hosted at the border guard facilities, but only for 48 hours. A child may be never hosted in a police detention facility. Second, about the intimate partner violence. This is a field that the police has been working on for a long time because it's been recognized in Finland that this is a problem. We do not have statistics by ethnicity or nationality, but because we treat it as a whole, as a problem that the police has to address better. So much has been done, and there is an ongoing valid directive to guide the investigations where the nature of this type of
you.